Hello and welcome to Think Watercolour. Today's demonstration is based on this photo from a summer walk last year by the lake at Dunham Massey in Cheshire. It's just a family snap of my wife, our youngest grandson and his dog. But I thought it would make a good example to show how having figures and objects in your painting can help to give you some scale. I've loosely sketched my interpretation of the photo and I've edited it by removing the large foreground tree trunk, as I thought it was too dominant in the photo and would be a distraction in my painting. If your aim is to paint a loose interpretation like this, try to keep your pencil marks to a minimum. Just sketch a few positional guidelines and do the rest of the work with your paintbrush. I'm starting with the background trees in the distance. It's just an initial wash. This is a mixture of sap green and cobalt teal. Very light watery mix. This is the underpainting really for the finished work, and I've mixed up some other greens. This is neat sap green, very watery. I'm just going to use this for the foreground grasses, just the initial wash. These colours are going to dry much lighter and they are the background to the painting, as I say. This is Saunders Waterford 300-gram rough paper, by the way. And for the tree trunk, the underpainting of the tree trunk, I'm just using a very watery mixture of raw sienna. For the bank on the other side of the lake, I'm just adding a little bit of sap green with some lemon yellow, just for a lighter shade for the dappled sunlight under those trees. And I'm going to let all that dry before I continue. Okay, the initial washes have now dried and I'm just using a mixture of sap green and jadeite green to create a medium green, just for the second wash on those trees on the far side of the lake. When you're mixing greens, try different combinations and see what you can come up with using different yellows and blues. Over the years I found a good shortcut for me is to use sap green and jadeite green, and I'll add yellow or blue, sometimes cobalt blue, sometimes ultramarine, to darken things. And as you can see here, this is all very much wet in wet. You can see the shine on the paper. This is a wet in wet technique, letting it all blend in together. And I'll probably add some more shadows later in the painting. You'll see me dipping into different puddles of green on my palette to just make different combinations. And for the foreground, dappled shadows on the grass, I'm just using a mixture of whatever's on the palette just to give me an initial wash to start creating the shadows. And while it's wet, just adding a little bit more colour, a little bit more pigment, just to darken things. And I'm doing the same on the opposite side, just to create those dappled shadows under the trees. They're all drying quite light, and which is what I want. The trees on the other side need to be light. They're in bright sunlight and there will be shadows added later. And just darkening the shadow underneath the trees. Again, whatever's in the palette, mixing it together, adding a bit of jadeite, a little bit of blue perhaps. I think I've put some cobalt blue in there. Again, adding some more shadows. The shadows should be on the right side of the trees mainly, and underneath them, because the light's coming from the left. The trick with an image like this is not to slavishly copy the reference. It's your interpretation. Don't try to paint every tree and leaf in the image. Simplify things and interpret your reference the way that you want to. As long as you capture the main essence of the subject, the viewer's eye will do the rest. And here I'm just putting in an indication of the algae that's floating on the surface of the lake. I'm trying to depict a bright summer's day, and at the moment the painting's looking very flat and kind of ugly. It's the ugly stage. You always go through this with this kind of painting. But once you start adding more detail and some contrast, it will start to come together. For the tree trunk, I've mixed up some burnt sienna, uh, reasonably thick mix, not too much water, just to paint the darker side of the tree trunk and the branches, or the main branches. And you can see I've left a strip on the left to indicate some sunlight hitting the tree. And I'm just dropping in some ultramarine into the burnt sienna and letting them blend wet in wet on the paper to create this darker shadow on that side, on the right hand side of the tree. And as you can see from this angle, everything's very, very wet. And I've just added some jadeite green with some ultramarine just for the really dark patches on the in the leaves at the top of the tree. This will create a nice contrast with the lighter background. This is a bright sunny day and the shadows are quite strong. And I'm going to darken the shadows on the dappled grass as well using the same colour. And as I do this contrast brings the painting to life a little bit. And once you've got these heavy shadows against the lighter background colours, the painting is really beginning to take shape now. The brush I'm using here is a detail brush, which has a fairly unusual shape to it, but it's really good for doing leaves and just picking up the texture of the paper. Again, you can see at this angle the reflection of the wetness of the paper, and I can just add more and more pigment and more detail as I go along while this is still very, very wet. The same with the shadows on the ground, that they're still wet, and the pigment's quite thick that I'm adding, so I won't get any backgrounds and blossoms. And as I move to the right, away from the shadow under the tree, I'm just lightening the colour of the leaves. They're still silhouetted against the sky, so they're still dark, but just using a lighter shade of green for them. Here I'm just using a rigger to indicate some of the thinner branches. The trick is knowing when to stop when you're doing this sort of detail. Too much is it will look very, very stiff. I've just added some ultramarine to some burnt sienna for a dark, very dark grey, almost black, to delineate the edge of the lake on the other side. And I'm using the same colour for the tree trunks of those distant trees. Not being too fussy. Just again, it's an interpretation of the original. This is a very green painting, but I quite like it for that. And once I add the figures, there will be an idea of the scale and a little bit of contrast. And I'm just adding some more shadow underneath those trees. And as you can see, I'm not slavishly following the original photograph. It's just an interpretation of it. That foreground tree is missing. I've left the figures in, and I mean reinterpreting the trees, but the shadow needs to be on the right and underneath the trees to really show the depth of them because the light's coming from the left. Just using a very light bluish grey mix for the shadow on my wife's wearing a white top and white trousers. My grandson's wearing a black t-shirt and shorts. But once you put these figures in, they do add a little bit of contrast. And the dog, of course, is black and white. It's a Cocker Spaniel. Not being too fussy, as long as I indicate roughly the right size and shape. You have this scale of the painting, as I said before. Figures and objects give scale, so sometimes that can be very important in a landscape. Often you don't need them, but in this case I think they just show the size of that tree. So it's an oak tree, and it adds a little bit of depth to the painting as well. Just adding a rucksack on my wife's back. Just maybe a little bit of shadow on the arms and legs. That's all dried, and I just thought that the lake was a little bit too white, so I mixed up a very watery mix of cobalt blue, and I just brushed it in with a flat brush. And finally, I'm just adding a few touches of grasses sticking up, larger in the foreground and smaller on the edge of the lake to create that idea of depth. And just a few finishing touches, a bit more on the shadow under the trees. And I think I'm pretty much done. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope you found this demonstration useful. I know it's a very, very green painting, but adding that ultramarine to the burnt sienna for the shadow on the tree just creates a little bit more depth in the painting, I feel. And the figures, as I said at the very beginning, they're there to demonstrate scale. They show the size of the lake, the size of the tree, and add depth to the painting. Do give this sort of thing a try yourselves. If you did find it useful, do give it a like. It always helps with YouTube. Do subscribe and hit the notification bell for future videos. And once more, thanks for watching.